What's up, guys? It's Nick Flurry here again for based on a true story. Now, you've probably noticed that I didn't make a video last Friday. It's because I've changed them to a bi-weekly basis for two reasons. One, so you as viewers could have more time to offer more suggestions or give me more requests, and two, so I could do more extensive research on these movies because they are based on a true story. I like to have facts along with the movie in the discussion. But this week for my installment of Based on a True Story, I've decided to talk about Malcolm X. The movie came out in 1992 and it was directed by Spike Lee. This was the early 90s. I believe the entire decade is the years that Spike Lee and his production company, a Spike Lee joint, meant something, because I think after the 90s he kind of broke off. His movies becoming lackluster, but in the early 90s Spike Lee was on it. Every movie he had those years were recognized by critics and critically acclaimed. Malcolm X is no exception. In 1992, Denzel Washington was nominated for an Oscar for Best Performance in a lead role. That year he was also nominated with Robert Downey Jr. for Chaplin, another biopic, and he was nominated with Al Pacino for A Scent of a Woman. In my opinion, along with Training Day, this is probably the best performance Denzel Washington has. He had to really work to harness the character of Malcolm X to become the character of it, and he really did. And I know Pacino probably deserved the Oscar for the movie, but I also feel that Denzel Washington was snubbed that year too. But about the movie, Malcolm X is about his growing up in Michigan, moving to Boston, and his upbringing through the criminal underground, and finally making the name for himself, becoming Malcolm X. His real name is Malcolm Little. In the Nation of Islam back in the 60s and the 50s, when it was most popular, they believed that as slaves they were given the name of their slave master. Their real names were taken away, and they were replaced with names that the slave master felt more comfortable with. Names like Johnson and Little, or whatever your name actually was. When you joined the Nation of Islam, it was replaced by an X until you found your true name years later. And that's where Malcolm X's name comes from. And I read the book a few years ago, and I remember enjoying it rather. And it's an autobiography, but it's called The Autobiography of Malcolm X as Told to Alex Haley. I always found that title pretty interesting because Alex Haley was a journalist and a publicist, and he's also the author of Roots. And what it is Alex Haley and Malcolm X sat in a room and they discussed his life, his upbringing, and where he came from, and how his life was rough, and what happened to him when he was a teenager, what happened to his father. And because Malcolm X's his viewpoint was so opinionated and so wild, it was really hard for even Alex Haley himself to believe. So the title of the book became The Autobiography of Malcolm X as Told to Alex Haley. So if there were anyone who came out and said, no, this didn't happen, this wasn't true, he could always fall back, well, this is what he told me, this is what I knew, this is all I have to work with, and that's what he told me. And I always found that very interesting. But the movie, how true it is, it follows the book very closely. From the opening, there are certain sections where Denzel Washington's Malcolm X, he narrates what's going on, what's happening, and the narration are excerpts taken exactly from the book, verbatim. And these certain narrations, they're cluttered too far into the movie, where they don't really come in a consistent manner. It's in the beginning, little in the middle, and they really just stop. So I guess when there's narration involved, you should keep it consistent throughout the movie. Don't just have it in one section. But that was probably that's one of the only few flaws I found with the movie. And as far as being true to life, it's actually pretty true. But there's one occasion, his prison years, because in the film, or if you've seen it, he's caught robbing houses, rich people's houses, during his criminal days, and he's caught and he's given an 8 to 10 year sentence. And during those prison years, in the film, he meets this man named Baines, and what Baines does is he gives Malcolm X, still at the time Malcolm Little, and an escape from the world he's known. He gives him well, I guess an awakening. He opened his eyes to the world around him, to what's been happening in his life, and he gives him the key to finding happiness and finding where he belongs. And he introduces him to the Nation of Islam. And during his prison years, Malcolm Little finds religion and becomes Malcolm X. This is true. Malcolm X, if you know the history, did find religion in prison. He found out who he was, his true calling, but it wasn't through the help of Baines. As I've mentioned before in my Black Mass discussion, what really bothers me about biopics or films that are based on a true story in general is that when a film creates a character, and Baines is one of the characters that was created for the film to, I guess, progress the story, because in reality, Malcolm X basically did all the work himself. He didn't have anyone in prison teaching him and showing him the ways. He would send letters to Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who ran the Nation of Islam, telling him who he was and what he wanted to do with his life. And the only help he had was from the outside, not from the inside. The Little family consisted of, I believe, 8 brothers and sisters. And one of his brothers, I can't remember exactly who it was, he would visit Malcolm X on occasion and tell him, "I've joined the Nation of Islam. I found my calling. I found what I need in life." And of course, he was hesitant at first because Malcolm Little was an atheist. He didn't really believe there was a God or a heaven. But as his brother begins to continuously convince him of the Nation of Islam's rules, I'd say, and their religion, Malcolm X began to fall to it, like he was under a spell. And he really, all his life, felt that he was searching for his place in the world, and he found it in the Nation of Islam. And after his brother began to stop coming as much, because I guess in the book it foreshadows Malcolm X's demise. His brother was sort of his spirit wasn't as high as it used to be when he'd come and say, I'm glad, I'm happy, I'm joined. But as the months would progress, he would visit his brother even less, because the Nation of Islam was sort of draining him, taking his spirit down. And Malcolm X didn't see it as this way. He saw it as if his brother wasn't as faithful as he should have been to the cause. And I believe after that, his brother stopped coming. And the movie didn't really focus on this at all. The movie doesn't really focus on his brothers and sisters at all. And it shows them in the beginning as children in a church setting. You see all of them sitting on a pew, and you see him in his house with his mother and father. But as far as his growing into adulthood, they sort of disappear. And it's funny because Malcolm X, throughout his book, he talks about how close he was to I think 3 of the 8 brothers and sisters. One of his sisters actually was the one who introduced him to Boston and showed him the world, the city life, and everything. And the movie really doesn't focus on it when it probably should have, because if he talks about it a lot in his book, I feel like it should have been in the film incorporated at least a little. And instead, they create this character named Baines to sort of add a plot device. And later in the film, if you've seen it, Baines betrays Malcolm X, betrays his trust because of his jealousy. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is looking more toward Malcolm X than he is Baines. And it works for the film because I guess you need an antagonist, someone for Malcolm X to go up against within the Nation of Islam. And there were, I'm sure, people like Baines in the Nation of Islam, but no one, he was never in odds with anyone as he was with Baines in the film. And it does offer, some very emotional scenes when Malcolm X is talking to Bane about his betrayal, and it's a scene where he says one hand washes the other. Baines I think the line is, Baines is a two-time hustler, but one hand washes the other. When Malcolm X is finally discovering who he really is, and it's very emotional. It's very a touching scene, but it for me it takes away from the movie if it really never happened. And there were only a couple of scenes like that. For the most part, the movie is very, very true to life. I believe there's one scene in particular that happened exactly as the movie portrayed it, was when the police brutally beat this member of the Nation of Islam and left him on the road. No one was around to help him. They took him to, I believe, just a jail cell, rather than take him to the hospital. He was beaten brutally. Blood was on his clothing. Malcolm X found out about this, and he went straight to the police station, demanding to see that brother, and I believe through various conversations with the police chief and the police captain, Malcolm X was given the right to see the brother of his in the Nation of Islam. And by conversation, I mean they weren't threats, but he was very I say passionate about finding this brother of the Nation of Islam. And upon finding him, they march. He and the entire Nation of Islam marched from the police headquarters to the hospital to see Brother Benjamin, and that actually happened. People actually followed them to the hospital. Malcolm X led the march, and it was a huge accomplishment. It showed the city just how powerful this Nation of Islam was, and how powerful Malcolm X was as a leader and as a man. Because I believe when a captain finds out just how powerful he is, Malcolm X is he's ordering his troops. All he does is raise one hand. They all stand attentive, and he points his finger. The camera zooms up on it, and they all begin to march. Malcolm X looks at the captain, and he walks away. And then at the line that the captain delivers is, "No one man should have all that power." And that's really what Malcolm X was, a very, very powerful individual. And that's what ultimately got him killed. The movie, I think, touches on this a little toward the end, but most of the jealousy is spurred through Baines, a character who was just created for the movie. And again, that was a major problem for me when I've tried to find out if he actually existed and didn't. But not enough to turn me away from the movie. As I said, it's a very good movie. It also stars Angela Bassett, who plays his wife in the film, Betty Shabazz. And in the end, when Malcolm X is at the conference, the fatal scene when he's shot and killed by in front of his wife and kids, it's very sad. It's kind of hard for me to watch because it's so real. It's people are running around and his children are crying. His wife is holding him, screaming and crying. It's one of those scenes you have to watch as part of the movie, but you kind of want to just skip past it because of how draining it is to see. And Spike Lee really did well with this movie. He did everything he could to make it as faithful as possible by using real locations. He actually traveled to Egypt when, in reality, Malcolm X made his Hajj, his spiritual pilgrimage to Egypt. He filmed in Egypt. He filmed on location. He went to the actual spots Malcolm X prayed. So Denzel Washington was actually in these locations of Malcolm X. And speaking more of Denzel, watching the movie, and if you close your eyes, you can hear Malcolm X's voice. If you ever heard of his speech, heard him give speeches or hear him talk, he sounds just like Malcolm X. Because I think almost 50% of the movie gives speeches. There's a whole montage where he's giving speeches in certain areas, and Denzel Washington is such a great orator, and he really carries the movie. Not saying everyone else's performance failed, but his performance really uplifted the movie to a point where you think highly of the movie than it actually should have been thought of as far as the flaws it had, but I feel like there's really no one else who could have played this role but Denzel Washington. He did such a great job, and again, I feel like the Oscar was snubbed away from him, but he did, find it out, earn his Oscar later on in life. But this is probably the role he's mostly remembered for, his role as Malcolm X, and his energy was so incredible that whenever he's in the scene, he really just steals it, the scene entirely. No matter who else is there, all you want to look at is Malcolm X or Denzel Washington. It's a really good movie. It's also running long, about 3 hours, but you'll forget you're watching it, a really long movie, because it captures you. You fall into it, and it's really easy to get into. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you watch it. Keep in mind, if you want to educate yourself on the character, look up, who he is and what he stood for. And he was a very passionate man, Malcolm X. He had beliefs that no one really, as far as America, supported, because they were so radical and so militant. But if you want to learn more about him, look him up. I encourage you, whenever you watch a movie based on a true story, to make an effort to find out what's true and what isn't before you actually believe it. Because some people look at these movies as educational rather than for entertainment, and some of them serve as both educational and entertainment, but mostly it's pure entertainment. So if you have the time, take a look at what you're watching, and make sure that it's what you want to see. And again, this is Nick Flurry for Based on a True Story. And keep watching. And again, if you have any more suggestions or requests for movies for me to look up, please leave them in the comments below, or leave them on my Facebook page. We'll get to them, because there are movies based on a true story that I haven't seen, or maybe I've never heard of, that you'd like me to watch or to look at, and I will find it and as quickly as I can do my research and have it for you within the next 2 weeks. But you have to leave suggestions, requests. If not, I'll just offer my 2 cents on the movies I know of. This is Nick Flurry signing off, and thanks for watching.